Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. I have indeed activated the wildcard for Game Week 30, so in today's video I'll be going through my final team and those few positions that I'm still deciding between, and I'll also discuss when I plan on playing the bench boost and the free hit as well. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, this video is not meant to be an entire wildcard guide or an entire chip strategy guide video. In fact, I uploaded a 45-minute video yesterday that, in my opinion, is one of my better videos this season, and a lot of you really enjoyed. So if you are arriving at this video with a bit of confusion about when the projected blanks and doubles are, you need a bit more help around chip strategy, or you're just a bit stuck in FPL, that video should answer pretty much all of the questions you have. This video here is specifically to go through my final wildcard team and to discuss those final few players that I'm choosing between and my own chip strategy around bench boost and free hit. So what I would advise is, if you've not watched yesterday's video, pause, go watch that video, and then come back and watch this one if you are considering wildcarding yourself. I don't want to waste loads of your time today because the deadline is later today, so I'll try to make this a shorter video. So let's start with the players that are pretty much nailed. I don't want to say anyone is fully nailed because I am tinkering a lot, and every time I think I'm happy with a draft, I come up with a different variation. But the 11 players that you can see on your screen right now have been in the majority of the drafts. So let's go through them. Let's start with triple Newcastle, because the thing that we can do with our teams right now, without knowing the exact doubles in 33, is we can load up on 3 Newcastle and 3 Crystal Palace, because we know for a fact that they double in 32, and also Crystal Palace have a very good chance of doubling in 33 as well. With those 3 Newcastle, I think in an ideal world I probably own Alexander Isak, Anthony Gordon and Kieran Trippier. But they are all very expensive, right? And you can't afford everyone, especially if you are building for a bench boost with some of the other assets that we might want to own. So Isak has to be in there for me. I think he's the best captain in 32. He is arguably the best captain in 31 as well. And so he has to be in the team. I don't love the Brentford game this week, but really I have an eye on 31 and 32. And then going into double game week 33, I may well sell him for Watkins, but I at least want him for the next 3 game weeks. The 2 players that have been in most of my drafts is actually Murphy and Burn, and that just comes down to them being the 2 cheapest players that I can pick outside of Alexander Isak. Jacob Murphy has started every game for Newcastle since game week 14. This is not just a player that starts most games, he has been pretty much nailed on. I started building drafts though where I had Gordon on the bench because I was like, listen, Gordon is just a better asset than Murphy. However, I spoke to a few Newcastle fans and they seem to think Murphy is more nailed on than Gordon as things stand, because both Barnes and Gordon just aren't very good on the right, and therefore Murphy is really the only option they have on that right wing, and Barnes has been playing at a pretty decent level, so Gordon doesn't necessarily come straight back in, and that's assuming that he's fit. I'm recording this before Howe's press conference. As well as being suspended for 30, he did pick up a bit of a knock on international duty. So I think for those reasons, Murphy at his price of 5 million just seems ridiculous value. So he is in there right now. And ideally, I'd actually probably like Livramento. But in a couple of my drafts, I've had 0 in the bank. And Dan Burn is 4.4 million. I also think Dan Burn's minutes are better. And he's more likely to get you a goal. Livramento is more likely to get you an assist. But Dan Burn getting on the end of a cross because he's so tall feels a little bit more likely. The only concern with Dan Burn is he's on 8 yellow cards. He needs to get through, I think, both games in game week 32. So the next 4 Premier League games he needs to get through without picking up a further 2 yellows. If he picks up a further 2 yellows in those 4 games, he will be suspended for 2 Premier League games. So if he gets booked against Brentford, we are sat there waiting for that 10th booking, and he could potentially miss technically both games in the double, which would be a nightmare. So I think if you can afford Livramento, maybe go there. All of that to say, Isak, Murphy, Burn, I want my 3 Newcastle. I think they offer really nice value, and that's where I've gone as of right now. With my 3 Crystal Palace, 2 of them have been in every single draft, and that is Munoz and Mateta. I think Eze and Sarr are exceptional options, and I would love to have them both, but I just think Munoz and Mateta are even better. Munoz, yes, the clean sheets aren't necessarily there. Like, there's no secret. If you look at Crystal Palace fixtures, I don't think clean sheets are there either. But Munoz is more attacking than Eze and Sarr half the time. Like, he's literally their furthest player forward. So you get the additional benefit of maybe some clean sheets. You get extra points for goals on top of midfielders and forwards. I just think Munoz at his price just offers ridiculous value. So I want him, and Mateta's the penalty taker. Mateta's the talisman. Mateta is the one that scores the goals, which then leaves one of Eze and Sarr. I've not got them in the team right now because depending on which option I go for, Eze and Sarr, I could go for either of them. But those 6, 3 Newcastle, 3 Palace have been in all my drafts. I've also had double Arsenal defence in every draft, Raya and Gabriel, because the fixtures are good for Arsenal. They're the best defence in the league, and Arsenal are also very likely to double in Game Week 33. I'd ideally like a third Arsenal asset. Hint, hint, you can see the man on the thumbnail, Bukayo Saka, but these 2 have been in every single draft. So that's 3 Newcastle, 3 Palace, but 2 definitely locked on, and then 2 Arsenal. I've also got 2 Man City in there, that being Gvardiol and Marmoush. So the big news as of, I'm recording this very late on, too late on Monday evening, but the news as of late on Monday is that Erling Haaland is out probably for most of the remainder of the season. It looks at least very unlikely at the moment that he'll be back for Game Week 33. As a result, we've got Marmoush, who takes some set pieces, will probably be on penalties, and probably playing as the number 9 for the City team at his price. Marmoush feels like one of the most obvious picks. So Marmoush is in there for that reason. And of course, once again, City are expected to double in 33. And then Gvardiol, I don't think he's necessarily a game breaker. If I was struggling for funds, he's a player that I wouldn't mind necessarily losing. But considering I can, in most cases, have him and a decent team elsewhere, and I do want multiple Man City players, Gvardiol has been in most of my drafts too. So 3 Newcastle, 3 Palace, but 2 confirmed. The 2 Arsenal, 2 Man City. Mohamed Salah is in there. Yes, he's got no remaining doubles, but it's Mohamed Salah. And without Haaland available, I think in a lot of weeks, I will still default to Salah captain, or it's at least nice to have that option. Like this week, you can absolutely captain Mateta or Marmoush, but I'll probably default to Salah because I just trust him with the armband. So it's a little bit boring, but I just don't see the value in selling him. Selling Salah doesn't get me much more that I would want, because, of course, we don't have that decision to make around Erling Haaland. The only other player then that's been in pretty much all of my drafts is Ezri Konsa. I hate it. Hate it as a pick. Ezri Konsa is boring. I don't trust the Aston Villa defence. He's got no attacking threat. And I think the double in Game Week 33 is pretty rubbish for Aston Villa. However, when we're looking at cheap defenders that serve me well in the weeks that I need them, Ezri Konsa is one of the better options. And I don't have the funds to go for a slightly better, more expensive defender in most cases. So Ezri Konsa just finds himself naturally drifting into my drafts quite often. So that took me 7 minutes. I'm quite happy with that. So there is 7 minutes on the 11 players. I think I've covered everyone there that are in most of my drafts. So what I'm now going to do in the next 2 sections is show you the 2 most likely options that I have with 4 differing players. So option A has 4 different players. Option B has a different 4 players in those remaining slots. And as you can see, it's the midfield where I'm most unsure at the moment. And then basically that remaining goalkeeper spot, depending upon which week I look to bench boost. So those are the 11 players that are very likely, but not definitely, going to be in my wildcard draft. Let's discuss the 2 options now. So option A, I would say, is the more boring option, the more template option, but also the option which I've been on for most of the week in terms of the structure and the rough personnel. So this option, it gives me a little bit of money in the bank with 0.6 in the bank. And firstly, it gives me Emi Martinez as my backup goalkeeper. Now, I know this will cause a little bit of controversy with some people because it's a lot of money to invest in a second goalkeeper that's not going to play very often. So why do I like Emi Martinez? There are actually quite a few reasons I like him. The most important reason that I like Emi Martinez is I'm still not sure whether I want to bench boost in 32 or 33. I think there is value to both, and we discussed that a little bit in yesterday's video. And I think there are ways that you could build a team that would really suit a bench boost in 32, but also a bench boost in 33. I don't think it necessarily matters too much, but why Emi Martinez is so fantastic is he's got Southampton in Game Week 32. So if you want a bench boost in 32, you've got a great fixture. And then in 33, we are definitely expecting Aston Villa to have a double game week. So if you go in 32, you've got a great fixture. If you go in 33, you've probably got a double. So Emi Martinez allows you to keep your options open if you have him on a bench boost. If you go for someone else, whether that be Sells or Areola, they don't have a great fixture in both weeks. So it does sort of narrow you down, especially Areola. He's got Liverpool in 32 and then Southampton in 33. If you choose Areola as your backup goalkeeper, you are almost forcing yourself into a bench boost 33, which might not be the end of the world, but if you do want to keep your options open, Martinez is your guy. So that's the one thing that I like about this. The other thing that's great about having Emi Martinez is Aston Villa, as of right now, are one of the more likely teams to double in 36 when Raya and Arsenal play Liverpool. So in a week where you don't want to play Raya because he's got a single game and quite a difficult one, there is a chance that Emi Martinez doubles. So I think Emi Martinez is arguably the best goalkeeper to have there with Raya, but it is requiring a lot of money, and in a lot of drafts, I just can't afford to have a goalkeeper that expensive on the bench. So that's the goalkeeper. The three midfield positions are then Kluivert, Palmer, and Eze. These are just three great options, right? Kluivert and Palmer both being on penalties. Eze on penalties if Mateta's not on the pitch, takes maybe the odd set piece here and there. Both Palmer and Kluivert also take set pieces. All three of these have really good minutes. All three of them are talisman for their team, right? They're the players that drive their teams forward. There's very little to dislike about any of them. Kluivert and Palmer in particular are also very, very highly owned. So this is a bit more of a protective play, having Kluivert and having Palmer, because these are two assets that could really damage my rank if I don't own them. Now, in this draft, I've gone for Eze because I have the funds to do so. This is a bit of a tricky one for me because I'm a data-driven manager. I like looking at analytical stuff. I like especially expected goal involvement. I like delving into the data, and nothing about the data suggests that Eze is better than Sarr. Pretty much every data point you might want to look at, apart from maybe historical data, points towards Sarr being a better asset. Minutes look very similar. The positions that they pick up on the pitch, eye test-wise, very similar. So why would I pay an extra $1 million for Eze? I just think he's a better footballer. And that's no disrespect to Sarr. I just trust Eze more. Now, as a finisher, he's arguably an even worse finisher than Sarr, but I just feel like he can find that moment of brilliance. Like, a lot of his goals do come from outside the box. He has scored the odd free kick. I just think Eze has that ability to go big on a more regular basis than Sarr, and I just love Eze as an asset. So I feel like if I had the funds to be able to have Eze, despite the data maybe pointing towards Sarr being better value, I think I would probably do it. So that's why Eze is in there ahead of Sarr, but I think they are both fantastic options. So yeah, that's that combination. It's Martinez, Kluivert, Palmer, Eze. I could, of course, in that Palmer spot, like that's the spot I know people will just say Palmer's in terrible form, Chelsea suck. They're getting players back, by the way, the likes of Jackson. Palmer's now had a bit of a break as well. I think Palmer's fantastic. For the next 3 weeks, he's got Ipswich at home in Gameweek 32. But if you didn't want Palmer, you could build this very draft that I've built here, but just put Saka or Foden in that Palmer spot. So you don't have to have Palmer. But again, if I have the funds, considering the next 3 weeks, considering the doubts around Foden's minutes, the doubts around Bukayo Saka's fitness, I know Palmer's still flagged on the FPL site, but he's been seen in training all week. Palmer looks like a really decent option for the next 3 weeks as a placeholder for one of those options in 33. And then in 33, you can decide, do you want to own Saka, do you want to own Foden? I think this setup here, before you even look at option B, is objectively maybe the more safe, sound, sensible, and logical setup. And also EO-wise, effective ownership-wise, it's probably the slightly safer setup as well. I actually think at the moment I prefer option B though, so let's take a look at that. So moving on to option B, this team has 0 in the bank, so I have no wiggle room. I'm recording this before the price changes, but because I've activated the wildcard and put in all of the players that I think could change in price, I believe I'm going to be okay, fingers crossed, unless there are some crazy price changes we didn't predict. And there is really nowhere that I can foresee actually freeing up the funds. There is not a single position in their team where I'm like, yes, I could go for this player instead and free up. Like, I have gone for the bare cheap players in all of the positions, including the ones that I want to own. So if I get priced out of this, it pretty much leans me towards option A. But hopefully, by the time of you watching this, I will not have been priced out and it is at least an option. So again, 11 players are the same. In this one, I don't have the option of going for Livramento instead of Burn, and I have to have Ezri Konsa in there. So those two cheap defenders will serve me very well. So the first point to note is, of course, this team here has Areola rather than Emi Martinez. It probably makes more sense to have a cheaper goalkeeper on the bench. And by the way, Areola could very well double in Game Week 36 as well, depending on who reaches the FA Cup final, which we won't get into here. But Areola has a chance for double in 36. And he's got Southampton in Game Week 33 when the bench boost is probably the most popular. The issue is, as I said, because he plays Liverpool in 32, I'm ruling out the option to bench boost in 32. I have to bench boost in 33 unless I want to bench boost with a goalkeeper that's playing Liverpool, which just doesn't make sense when I've wildcarded only a couple of weeks earlier. So I'm shoehorning myself here into a bench boost 33 if I go for this draft here. Then the three options in the midfield, I think are a little bit spicier. I mean, Ismail Assar versus Eze, it is what it is. That is going to be probably a very swingy decision. It doesn't deserve to be. They're both great assets. They should hopefully score pretty similarly, but I don't have the option of going for Eze here. So that one's a pretty easy one to explain. But then this draft allows me, rather than Kluivert and Palmer, to go Foden and Saka. There's lots to love about this, and there's lots to absolutely hate. Both of these are risks, right? Foden has started one of the last 3 games, and in that game, he got 60 minutes. He's got like 60, 16, 13 or something, right? He's not starting on a regular basis, is the first note, and he's been pretty awful this season. Even when he started, even in the games where City start to click, Foden's not really been at it. So why do I even want Foden? He's like 9 million. What is he gaining me? It's just a bit of a punt. The Leicester game this week is fantastic. He does have the double in 33 we expect anyway. And I think with Haaland being out, you would expect Foden's minutes to shoot up. Now, Foden could play as the 9, but I think that would be Marmoush. But the nature of moving Marmoush from the left into the more central position opens up a wing spot. So you could see something like Savinho and Foden on the wings, or you could see Doku and Savinho with Foden occupying a more central position. It just offers one extra position in the team that isn't taken up. And we do know that Foden is one of the most talented players in the Premier League. Whatever you want to say about him as a player, he does have the ability to turn it on. And in this back end of the season, with obviously no Champions League, I could see Foden getting pretty good minutes and doing very well. And if it doesn't pan out the way I think, he's so expensive that I can downgrade to pretty much anyone, and it frees up some money to then spend elsewhere. So I'm not saying I have to keep Foden forever, but at least a bit of a fun pump for the Leicester game. That's the sort of thought process behind it. The other option I've got is I could just go for Savinho in that position if I think he starts, or we get a leak that he's going to start, which I don't think we will. Then that's great. Then I could do that and then I have more funds. But I just love Phil Foden as an asset. Like, he's done so well for me in the past, and it's a little bit nostalgic, and maybe that isn't the same Phil Foden. But if I can get him into a team that looks as good as this, I'm very tempted to do so. And then the reason Saka's in there is because we have had news as of this evening, and again, I'm recording this on Monday the 31st late, that Saka played a few days ago in a behind closed doors friendly, got through it very well, and then Arteta proceeded to say that he's had 6 sessions before that friendly that he got through okay as well. So Saka's had 6 sessions and a friendly. I don't know that we got a leak as to how many minutes he's played. I now think there's a very good chance Saka starts. My initial instinct was he gets 20 to 30 minutes against Fulham, maybe starts the Everton game, building up minutes for the 2 Real Madrid legs. I now think there is a very good chance he gets 60 to 70 here. And obviously, I'd rather he gets more than 60 to 70. And this week, Palmer is better, but I can't afford Palmer. And going for Saka rather than Palmer, it saves me a transfer, because I'm probably going to want Saka in double game week 33 if Arsenal do indeed get the double that we expect. So, Foden and Saka both probably doubling in 33, both with home fixtures this week, both have that ability to go massive, and probably and potentially saves me transfers because they have the double. So I have no real issue starting with Saka if we think he's going to start. Now, we might get a leak. If we don't get a leak, or he's leaked to not start, I've got 2 options. I rip this up and go for A, or I go for a different combination in here that allows me to go for Palmer rather than Saka, or I just bench Saka and start Murphy instead. I don't think Murphy against Brentford is great, but it is a home game. I still think Murphy's a good asset, and it would allow me to then have Saka from sort of 31 and beyond. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of option B. So on your screen now, I'll flash up basically the differences between option A and option B. So it's Areola, Sarr, Saka and Foden versus Emi Martinez, Eze, Kluivert and Palmer. I don't think there's a massive amount in that, especially when you consider obviously option A having 0.6 million in the bank as well. But I would love your feedback. And of course, it could be a combination. It might be that you say, I prefer option A, but I would prefer option A with Foden or Saka rather than Palmer. That's absolutely fine. Let me know your feedback down below. If I could get this draft here, but with Emi Martinez instead of Areola, it wouldn't be a discussion. Or if for Eze instead of Sarr. If I basically had an extra million, which you could just keep saying that every time you get more money. But if I had a little bit more money and I could just make it a little bit stronger here, I think I would prefer option B. And as of right now, I am marginally leaning towards this option simply because Saka saves me a transfer, and I feel like this is the slightly spicier combination. This is the combination that gives me two fairly lowly owned assets in Foden and Saka. I'm backing against the likes of Cliver and Burmo, Palmer, the more highly owned midfielders. This just feels like I'm taking a little bit more risk, but calculated risk. I'm not taking risk for the sake of it. And when I looked at this draft and realized that I could afford it, it's always a good sign when you're like, I did not think I'd be able to afford that. And I've sent this to a couple of people, and the response has been, oh, that's a nice draft. Like, how did you afford that one? And it's always nice feeling. Whenever I look at someone's draft and think, how did they afford that? That's normally a good sign that you've structured it in a way where you've got the most value that you possibly can. So as of right now, marginally leaning option B. Could still do option A or potentially even option C and D, which I've not considered yet. So let me show you what this looks like for the next few weeks when I'm planning on bench boosting, free hitting, and beyond that as well. So guys, I've jumped over to Fantasy Football Hub to just show you what option B would look like in terms of my bench boost and building over the next few weeks. Again, I might not go for this option, but it will give you a bit of an idea also about the shortfalls of it as well. So if I went for this in 30, again, there would be 0 in the bank. This is the team as I showed you it. In 31, I obviously wouldn't need a transfer. I'd be tempted to bring in the likes of Burn and Murphy, as you can see here against Leicester, which would mean dropping the likes of Ismail Assar, maybe Gvardiol to the bench. I don't need to decide that right now, but basically the team would look good. It's not an awful bench boost in 31, but I see no real need to do that when it looks better in both 32 and 33. As I said, the issue that I have with this draft, and I love the look of the team, by the way, for 32. It looks absolute. Predicted points, 100.3. I'm very excited for 32. It's actually a really good bench boost with Foden, Gvardiol, and Konsa at the moment. And you might say, Rosh, you wouldn't bench Foden. Who am I benching then? It's basically Foden, Saka, Salah, or Marmoush are the only single game week attackers that I've got. It would be Marmoush or Foden, but I think I'd lean Foden because Marmoush would probably be on penalties, and I don't want to ever bench Salah and Saka. I suppose if Saka's minutes look a little bit less secure around the ties with Real Madrid, or maybe he looks a little bit fatigued, then potentially I could do Saka on the bench. But anyway, the point being, the 3 outfield players look good for a bench boost 32, but Areola is sat in there. Areola ruins it. If Areola just had a decent fixture, great. If Areola's Southampton game was in 32, it would be an easy one. I just don't have the funds to go for a better goalkeeper that week. So therefore, I can't really bench boost in 32 unless I want to bench boost with Areola against Liverpool. So if I skip forward to 33, these are with the projected fixtures, obviously courtesy of Ben Krelling and Fantasy Football Hub. So the team's in a really good spot. In terms of players that have a single game in my starting 11, if I go with this team, and this is without making a transfer, of course, it's just Salah and Isak. On the bench, it's only Murphy, Areola, and Burn. I've got Konsa on the bench in place. So I would have, I believe, 3 free transfers at this point. So the plan as things stand is to do something like, I think Isak to Watkins will be very popular, and rightly so, right? So, sorry guys, random cut as always seems to be the case when I do these planning ahead sections. So yeah, that transfer of Watkins in for Isak obviously isn't helping the bench boost, but it'll give me a little bit of money, and it gives me another doubler as well. And Newcastle's fixtures from 35 beyond aren't great. Watkins and Aston Villa could also double in 36. So I think that is a transfer which will make a lot of sense. So in terms of the starting 11, it's perfection, I would say. And if I do say so myself, but it gives me 10 doublers. The only single game player is Salah. I've got triple City, triple Arsenal, triple Palace. As I say, Salah against Leicester, Watkins for a great fixture. It looks like a bit like a free hit. But of course, I have the bench boost. Now, this is why I don't like the bench boost in 33 as much as I do 32. Because if I were to bench boost in 32, I don't have to worry then about making transfers for the bench boost, right? In 33, I have to make 2 transfers, or at least one to sort out one of Burn or Murphy, because I don't really want double Newcastle against Villa away when I've got Konsa, I've got Watkins. It just doesn't inspire me for a bench boost. So one player that I would quite like to get is probably Rodgers. Now, it might be that Rashford or Asensio is a better pick, but they are also a lot more expensive, and I don't actually have much funds. So something like Rodgers in for Murphy feels pretty good. And then I would need to free up 0.1. So I would have to, at this stage, bring in someone for Dan Burn. I've not actually looked at this, but is there anyone at 4.3 that stands out? Like Mazraoui against Wolves? Now, that is interesting. That's very interesting. That could be something like, if I have to fund it and it's a home game, slightly better fixture there. I don't hate that. So the bench boost could look something like Areola, Konsa, Rogers, Mazraoui. Price changes might affect this. Other injuries and issues. Like, let's say Phil Foden's not getting minutes at this point. Selling Phil Foden. Let's say that Saka looks really run down and we don't expect him to start both. Maybe I lose him. Any player gets injured here, and all of a sudden it's maybe... makes it easy to free up the funds, essentially. But that is roughly what I guess I'm looking at for a bench boost. It's not great, right? Areola's not great. Mazraoui would be great. 2 Villa players for a double that doesn't look great. I much prefer the bench boost here if the keeper was better. Foden against Palace, Gvardiol against Palace, and Contra against Southampton. That's a stronger bench boost. So maybe I do just bench boost and just accept Areola's going to be a bit stinky against Liverpool. Anyway, that's if I go for option B. If I go for option A, where I have Emi Martinez instead of Areola, all of a sudden I have the option to bench boost in 32. So maybe that should send me back towards option A. Do you know what? I'm going to leave it there because I don't need to chew your ear off anymore about this. But just know, if I go back to... Is this going to have the graphic up that I want? Those 11 players, not including Areola, Foden, Saka, Sarr, those are very likely to be in there for me. I just need to think about those final 4 spots. How important is it for me to have Martinez rather than Areola to offer a decent option for 32 or 33 bench boost? Do I want Foden and Saka, or do I want to play safe with Kluivert and Palmer? And then how much do I think Eze is an upgrade on Sarr? These are the key decisions for me to think about. But hopefully that has given you something to think about, and it's helped you to finalise your own draft as well. So guys, there you have it. That is my final wildcard team, but not quite final wildcard team ahead of the deadline this evening. Do not miss the deadline, and make sure to tune into the deadline stream later. I will be streaming 4:15 p.m, way beyond the deadline as well, to do a bit of post-deadline stuff. But yeah, make sure to tune into that if you want to see my final team and get your questions answered as well. Until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.